Hello, everybody. We're going Genesis 15 and 16 today. So if you haven't read it, read it now. But I'm going to just share a couple of thoughts about these two chapters. Wow, there's a lot in these chapters, and I wish I could spend longer on them, but I'm just going to do some quick things, and then I'm going to ask you to share whatever came to mind for you in the comments, because we can do so much more together. I can bring a couple of thoughts, you're noticing things, God's speaking things to you, and it's actually so encouraging when you share those things in the comments. So please do just take a minute and jot down what it is that God showed you in these two chapters. There's loads in these two chapters. So a couple of things that stood out to me. Firstly, Abram's just been blessed by this priest that's, shared with him what he has, and they've had this amazing blessing exchange at the end of 14. And then it says, God spoke to Abram in a vision and says, "Fear not, Abram, I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great." And whenever God promises to be our shield, it's like a comforting and not comforting promise, because it means that we're going to be attacked in some way. Like, is our faith going to be attacked? Is our comfort, our security going to be attacked? But God promises that even if that were to happen, He's our shield. But what I love is that Abram is clearly wrestling because his circumstances don't match the promise that he's been given. And instead of holding that wrestle inside or kind of having an internal battle, he shares it with God. And we should be bold to do that too. We should be bold to sometimes say, God, how? God, when? And it's not that we expect God to answer our question. We can't feel entitled to answers to everything, but sometimes it's important to voice the questions in our hearts to God, not to people around us. That just sows doubt and discouragement. But sometimes to take it to God implies a trust that's there, that actually staying silent, which kind of appears to be strong and steadfast, that silence can actually let things fester inside our hearts. And so he asks, "How, God? Because I don't have an heir yet." And you've got to imagine the humiliation of this circumstance. God's promise to Abram has been all around generations and the family that he's to be a part of. His name means father. The name Abram means father. But how awful must it be to have gone 80 years of your life being called father and having no children, and even having a very specific promise of God over your life regarding your offspring, and still not seeing any fruit there? Abram is wrestling in a very real way with this, but God shows him this incredible image of the stars in the heavens and the promise there. And it's so interesting that quite simply in verse 6 it says, "He believed the Lord, and it was counted to him as righteousness." This isn't just believing in God, this is believing God. And sometimes those two things are quite different. For lots of us, we have a lifestyle of believing in God, but that doesn't always mean that we believe God in some of the things that He says to us or about us. And we have to choose to do the latter, because when we do, it's credited to us as righteousness. This is actually the first time in the Bible that we see the word believe. It's an action word, and it's Abram who chooses to put it into action in his life. I believe God and what He's saying. I agree with what it is that He's speaking over me. And that was counted to him. It was credited to his account as righteousness. Then there's this amazing sacrifice, and God walks among the sacrifice and gives Abram a dream and shows him, this is the place and these are the people that I'm going to give you. But as we know, it's very difficult to match the circumstance with the promise. And so particularly for his wife, Sarai, she really struggles with this. And she's also feeling this pain, feeling this frustration. It's an intensely personal thing, isn't it? Not just a promise unfulfilled in our life, but actually in our own body, in her womb. She was seeing that there's barrenness here where there should be fruitfulness. And that's so personal and so intimate. It's difficult. And so she comes up with a solution. She decides, I know how to fix this. Hagar, this servant girl, let's have surrogacy. Why don't you have a baby with her, and we'll raise that child as our own child? And it says Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. And we have to be so careful that doubt can come in the form of people far away from us, people we don't know, but it can also come in the form of people we love sometimes. And we can all experience doubt, but we have to be careful what we're listening to. Abram listened to Sarai, and it led him down a very messy path that's going to have repercussions and is still having repercussions today in the world. But ultimately, she suggests this surrogacy plan. She shares her doubt, and it's actually taken on by her husband, and they decide this is one route. Perhaps this is what God meant all along. And this servant girl, Hagar, gets pregnant. But what I find amazing is that even though it's a messy situation, we then see in verse 7 of 16, an angel of the Lord found Hagar by the spring. This is the first appearance of an angel in the Bible. And look who an angel is coming to. An angel is coming to visit a woman who is out of favor. She's at the end of her rope. She's been mistreated. She feels like she has no options but to run. And an angel comes to her and says, "Fear not. I'm going to make this right. God is going to make this right, I should say." And he asks her a couple of questions that I think we probably need to ask ourselves a bit more often. Where are you going? Where have you come from? And where are you going? And as simple as they sound, those are actually two really deep questions. Where have we come from and where are we going? When we consider those two things as believers, it will actually do a great work in our faith. Look where I've come from. Look where I've been taken from. Look what God has rescued me from. Look what has been removed from my life. Look what chains have been broken. God's already worked so much in me. And where are you going? What is God saying that's ahead of you? What are you running towards? There's so much in those couple of questions that I think probably we need to consider them more. But she shares with the angel her dilemma. She explains what's happening, that she's feeling mistreated because she is now pregnant in the household of a woman who cannot get pregnant. And so there's just huge tension there. And this is what the angel says. He says, "Return to your mistress and submit to her." Now, this is a huge theme of Genesis, okay? So just big theme moment. Very often, people in Genesis are fleeing from one place to another to get out of their circumstances, or they're asking God to change their circumstances. And very often, God does not change their circumstances or even sends them back into the very thing that was causing them pain or distress, because his desire is to change their heart. And that key word, submit, is what God really wanted Hagar to know in this situation. Trust me, let me write this story. Don't write your own story. Submit to the circumstances that you're in. Don't try and flee from them, because in submitting to them, it'll be the heart that is changed. And that's what God is really all about in the book of Genesis. So this is the beginning of the story of Ishmael. Ishmael is the root of the Arabic people. And Isaac, who is to come, is going to be the root of the Jewish people. But there's disobedience in this story, and disobedience is always going to bring a bit of tension. It's going to bring dysfunction. But them trying to solve their own problem wasn't the best move. It's doubt outworking itself. When we try and take control, that can be doubt working in us. But God always has a plan. It's to change the heart. It's to make things right. It's to make peace. And that's what we're going to see in the next couple of chapters. Hopefully I'll make a video tomorrow, because I'm sure you all would really be sad to miss out on the circumcision verses that are coming. But please do jump into the comments and tell me what you thought of today.